Welcome back to the neighborhood. On this episode, we are continuing our effin' game swap with a game where random rules, and someone at the studio was a big fan of Tim Burton. We're talking about Lost in Random. Welcome to the podcast where three longtime friends talk about video games from the average gamer's perspective. My name is Andrew Kimball.
I'm Dylan Wren.
And I'm Aubrey Summer.
And
we are your friendly neighborhood gamers.
So the way we are going to structure this episode is that Aubrey and Dylan had to play up through chapter 3 of the game. The game is broken down into 6 chapters, each representing the side of a die. And so up through chapter 3 was about the halfway point, so that is as far as they had to play. We're going to be discussing those 3 chapters in detail, but we will not really be spoiling anything beyond those 3 chapters. So before we get into the conversation of how this experiment went, what is Lost in Random? Lost in Random is an action-adventure game developed by Zoink and published by Electronic Arts. It was part of the EA Originals program, and it was released on September 10th, 2021. It was the final game developed by Zoink prior to their consolidation into Thunderful Development. It received generally positive reviews from critics, and a sequel titled Lost in Random: The Eternal Die is in development at Thunderful and is scheduled for a 2025 release. Lost in Random is played from a third-person perspective. In combat, the player can use even slingshot. While it does not damage enemies, opponents hit by her slingshot drop energy cubes which fuel Dicey. Once Dicey is fully fueled, players can roll it and time will be temporarily stopped. During this period, players can select the card they want to use, which is the only way to deal damage to enemies. There are 5 different types of cards: weapon, damage, defense, hazard, and cheat, offering different gameplay advantages and combat abilities. For instance, one of the cards turns Dicey into an explosive cube, while another allows players to place traps. Cards can be earned through collecting coins. As players progress, new cards will be earned, and they will recover Dicey's lost pips, which would enable Even to roll higher numbers during combat. The game also features light role-playing game elements. When Dicey and Even are exploring the Kingdom of Random, they will meet various non-playable characters. The game features a dialogue wheel, which allows players to select dialogue options while conversing with NPCs. So there was a lot of terminology in that description that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more as we break down this game. But before we dive into chapter 1, because I think we'll break down this conversation going kind of like chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, what are your overall thoughts on your experience playing Lost in Random?
I liked it. I've completed chapter 3 and I just started chapter 4 and I'd been playing for like a hot minute, and there was kind of like a turn where like I'm trying to do a lot of sneaking around and I was not in the headspace for that at the beginning of chapter 4, so I set it down. But the aesthetic is huge in terms of like maintaining interest. The visual interest it provides, and then the kind of like quirky sort of British humor that's very like Leica Studios. It reminded me a lot of their movie The Boxtrolls. And so, yeah, I was having a good time. There was an initial hurdle with the combat when I first like got into the combat, that I had been playing a bunch of Yakuza up to that point and like needed a break from that, so I started Lost in Random, and I got to like the first like combat scenario, and I was like, oh, this is real different. And so I just like set that down until I got to the stop point in Yakuza and came back to it. And then once I had like other combat systems off my brain, it was a lot easier to settle into it and like run with it. It's good.
Yeah, when I picked this game, I was thinking setting and tone, Aubrey. Card and dice combat, Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
Great pull.
Yep. Yeah. I also really have enjoyed my time with it. It's a little bit janky, which is, I think, totally fine. Like I didn't go into this expecting it to be, like this super AAA polished game, but it feels really good. It's just a little bit, there are occasional like little wonky things with it, but like the atmosphere and the aesthetic of it, like Aubrey was saying, super, like it feels like you're in like a Tim Burton type movie or something like that, or like it reminds me a lot of Coraline, I think is the one that I was like getting, and it was just like, this is such a, like, it feels like you're playing one of those movies, like even the like art style and animation, like some of the jankiness I think almost helps
Right.
it feel
like
more like it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I thought that was really kind of, I don't know, I liked it. I thought the combat was actually pretty, I think if there was more of it, I would probably be annoyed by it, but it feels like they strike kind of like a good balance of like, you're exploring, you're doing like these little puzzles, you're doing this other stuff. And then like you'll get into like the combat sections, and those feel like they last an appropriate length of time. And I had fun with them, So
Yeah, in a weird way that loops back to the like, it's called claymation, but it's not like technically clay anymore. It's like called plastine or whatever, which apparently it's no longer made, and they used the last of it to make Wallace in this latest Wallace and Gromit movie that's coming out the holidays this November. And so, like, they don't have any material to make Wallace and Gromit anymore, which is insane to me.
Did they forget how
they
to
could
make
find
it?
Or they could just find a new material that like
Yeah, that is similar.
is close enough.
But
yeah.
I think they're like the only studio that really uses it, and they're not using it enough to, they're not using it as a rate to, for the producers to keep making a bit. But in a way, those little moments of jank, which I am not confident enough in myself as a gamer to not attribute like hiccups like that to just me like messing up, unless it's really egregious. And so I didn't clock anything really outrageous or super bad, but in a kind of like roundabout way, it does remind me of, especially with the older Wallace and Gromit shorts or videos where you could like see their thumbprint on like the clay, and it's those like little moments of like, this is not technically right, but it was made by people.
Yeah,
that kind of like loops back around really nice. But
yeah, my only real complaints is that I think I maybe disagree with Dylan a little bit on the combat lasting like appropriately long. I think there were some sections where some of the combat scenarios, and I think it's because I don't know how you would do it any other way, but because you're constantly like kind of pausing combat to select cards and stuff, like it just, certain scenarios felt like they just dragged on, certain boss fights especially. And so like that was kind of the only thing when I played through it that I felt could maybe be a little bit more fine-tuned. But I agree with what both of you guys are saying. I think it's a very unique game, and it exists in that space that I really love in gaming these days, of being like that double A, like it's got enough budget to do some cool things that like maybe an indie couldn't do, but it's not triple A, and it's not so like it wasn't made by a committee, and it's just an interesting concept put into video game form, and I really appreciate it for that.
Yeah. And like,
go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and shout out, I know EA gets a lot of crap these days, but also like shout out to them for yet another
their originals program,
originals game that I think is cool that it exists,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they have a lot of really good, interesting games under their originals banner.
Yeah. It's that like perfect level of like really charming double A where the personality carries it across the finish line in a really strong way.
Yep, I 100% agree. So The way we're going to go through this is kind of like chapter by chapter. So in chapter 1, it's a lot of world building and story setup regarding like the various levels of the world. The world is basically like 6 sides of a die. Like, I don't think the like globe is actually a like D6, but there's each city, like the first one you start out in, the poorest city is called Onecroft, and that's where your protagonist is from. She's a sister to her name is Even. She's sister to Odd. Everything in this game is like very like dice and numbers puns, which it's back to that kind of personality and that like quirky writing. And you learn that the queen of random is randomly taking children from Onecroft to live with her in 6. I can't remember what they called the 6 world.
And like before this part starts, you go through the tutorial, which I assume is the queen and her sister dies at the end of the tutorial, right?
Where you're introduced to like the dice rolling and the
like where they're
and stuff.
Yeah, there's some sort of like combat with 2 girls who
I
assume
right.
one is like the queen and her sister. Like I assume that was kind of the setup for stuff that comes later.
It's a very brief, I pretty much forgot because it's a very brief little like combat system where you get to do the dice rolling. Yeah, so you do that, and then you end up in Onecroft as Even, and the queen shows up and takes your sister Odd with some shenanigans. The dice,
well, it's like your birthday,
very obviously rigged
or something. Like on your 12th
they come
birthday.
And take you on your 12th birthday. Yeah, it's again, it's very much that like kind of Coraline, Tim Burton. Well, like just like that kind of story setup-esque of like it just like really fits the theme. And so the queen comes, she takes Odd away after Even and Odd try to like escape. They try to hide her, and it doesn't work. They end up finding her anyways, and they're constantly saying random rules. And so then time jump ahead. It's been a year later. Even has like this dream. It's kind of a running through line of like kind of her, kind of you, the player, kind of keeping tabs on Odd is like through Even's like dreams or like her hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
She wakes up and there's this little ghost, and the ghost is like basically telling her, follow me. And so that is kind of what starts you out on this adventure, is you're following the ghost out of Onecroft and ultimately trying to find your sister. And that is sort of the through line that Even is following. And then the structure of the game is she ends up in a different section. She goes through the various hierarchy of this world, solving people's problems in order to ultimately try to get to the queen and find her sister. So in Onecroft, you're not really solving anybody's problems. You're just trying to get out.
Yeah. And using your slingshot a whole lot.
Well, yeah, it's very much the like tutorial world. You don't have your dice yet. You don't really have cards. You pick up cards kind of near the end of the level, and then it isn't till after you actually escape Onecroft, which we can kind of talk about that section a little bit, because that's kind of like the first gameplay. You do a little like stealth and puzzle solving trying to get to the ship. But it isn't until you actually like escape and the ship like goes down in a storm that you end up like in this in between land and find Dicey. So like you don't really have the core structure, like the core gameplay loop fully set in stone yet at this point. It's very much like a world building, setting the tone, giving you the like the player motivation, and then kind of kickstarting your adventure. But like, what did you guys think of this first chapter?
I liked it. I thought it did a great job of sort of like setting up the world and the tone and that sort of thing. I thought there was a lot of just,
wacky characters.
Yeah, wacky characters, and just like way more world building than I thought like, I'm glad that they did it because I thought it was like cool and interesting, but I was surprised that they did so much because they probably could have gotten away with a lot less and just kind of survived on like vibes alone, you know?
But there's so much talking you can do in this game if you want to. Like, you can talk to so many, and like when I booted this game back up like a week or two ago, just to kind of refresh myself before the episode, I wasn't really talking to a lot of NPCs. But I remember the first time I played through it, it was like, yeah, you can just the parts of the game where you're just exploring and you're not really in combat, or like the story isn't like thrusting you forward. You can really just kind of chat with a ton of NPCs and just get their story and just kind of live in the world.
Well, and I like that for the most part too. There's not like you can kind of just freely explore. It's not like one of those games where it's like, oh, there's enemies over here. You got to give it, you know, give them a wide berth, or you've got to stealth through here. You know, like so many games that I've just that have come out. You know, it's like it feels almost rare that you can kind of just like walk around this weird little town and explore it. You know, without the threat of like, oh, I'm going to get in a random fight. And maybe that's just because I play too many like From Software games where it's all just random fights around every corner. But, you know.
Or that's the entire premise of the game. It's just
like I was pleasantly surprised that I could just like follow the ghost and talk to people. And there was not like a constant sense of urgency, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ghost is just going to chill and wait for you until you're ready to come over to it.
I will say the map that you can pull up in the menu is atrocious. It's again suits the aesthetic beautifully, but is not helpful at all.
Yeah.
That was not that was
it's just kind of like you're on this street, and it's like just sort of like an animated place. Like, and it gives you the idea.
So it's like, what direction do I need to go? I don't know. Just keep going. You'll find it.
Yeah, I remember that the first time I like got to like the Threedom, like chapter 3.
Yes.
Just really spending way more time just trying to figure out where I was trying to get to rather than just like playing the game and like achieving goals.
Yeah. Threedom really brought that into like sharp perspective. Like I first pulled it up in Two Town, and it was like, okay, well that's not the most helpful, but all right. And then in Threedom, when I actually was trying to like use it to help me navigate, it was
you do a lot more like backtracking and stuff in Threedom than you did up to that point.
And it's just laid out more like kind of like a hub and spoke, like it's not a maze, but there's a lot more like crisscrossing pathways in Threedom versus in Two Town.
Yeah,
but
because you're kind of like running back and forth between like 3 areas too, right?
Yeah. Well, and back on the NPC talk, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're pretty much like fully voice acted, right?
Yeah.
Most of them. Yeah. I'm sure there were some that maybe just like gave you like a text box or something, but
I feel like I remember skipping a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, I did the same thing in this game. It's one of those games where like I appreciate what they're going for and that they went, but sometimes the actual voicing and like reading of the lines is way slower than I read through it, and I'm like, let me just go ahead and I'll stop you right there. Let's move on to the next one.
I can read a lot faster than, oh, hey there, little one. What are you doing here? Like, it's like, oh my God.
Well, and
let's go.
And sometimes there wasn't like there really wasn't a distinction between this is an NPC that's got like a bunch to say and you can follow like a dialogue tree with them. And this is an NPC that's just going to like say the same 2 things over and over again, you know? And so like I'd walk up to people and be like, you know, let's see what you have to say. And it was, you know, it was always kind of that
side quest, or are you flavor?
Right. That roll of the dice, if you will.
Random rules. Yeah. So as you're working your way through Onecroft, ultimately you end up like at the harbor trying to stow away on a ship to get out to try to just go straight to, I should look up what 6 is called, but go to the Queen. And obviously that's not going to work because it'd be a really short game.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
But to get to the ship, you kind of have to do like a little bit of move the platforms and avoid the lights. And like, what did you guys think of that?
It was a nice introduction to the platforming to give an idea of like the level of traversal you can kind of expect. It's obviously not like, Assassin's Creed where they're like, look at all this parkour.
Yeah.
I have tried to make a point. I don't know if I missed any earlier on, but once I like found it in the menu of trying to do like all the collectibles. So I like, so I cleared it and then I saw the piece of storybook like on the other side of the like puzzle arena thing.
Same.
I had to like, okay. Like, and it took 2 minutes. Like nothing's been like painfully obtuse other than just getting lost in 3dom. But yeah, it required more thought than probably all of the puzzles, quote unquote, in Hellblade Senua's Saga did combined.
Well,
That's a low bar, I will say. That's an incredibly low bar.
I also don't know if that's completely accurate. Like not the spotlight puzzle. Like I think there are puzzles in this game that require way more thought than all of the ones in Hellblade. I don't know if this first one because like at least in Hellblade you had like kind of the dueling dimension thing you had to kind of play with. I feel like that was a little bit more in depth than what this was. Literally like hit 3 switches, dodge the lights kind of thing. But
yeah,
I do think just to dunk on Hellblade some more. Like
literally Hellblade was me just pushing the forward stick until she couldn't go any further. All right, where's the floating water? Okay, there's the floating water orb. Okay, let me stare at it. Okay, and I'm moving forward until I can't move forward anymore. Like, so yeah, having to hit switches was a little more than Hellblade.
But I do think like in Lost in Random, it's another like kind of, I think what I'm learning as we discuss more and more games, especially in this space, is like the games that do the like fun combat system and then break it up with some like relatively simple environmental puzzles to like, that's kind of my jam. And so that's what this game is like you get to explore and talk to people and then you do your combat and then sometimes you have to like shoot a few things with your slingshot to make some stuff fall down or to move some platforms and like
send Dicey over there.
That's good.
Yep. Well, and there's not, I appreciate that there wasn't like a dedicated jump button. So it's not like it was some like kind of janky jumping platforming. It was
right. Like, am I supposed to make this jump and I'm just not? Or,
exactly. Like if you're supposed to jump, you go to the edge and it gives you a button prompt for A and then your character automatically jumps. You're not going to miss the platform because it is built in.
Right.
And I appreciated that.
It's a puzzle, not a platformer. Yeah.
Exactly. So then you get on the boat, you meet another quirky character that...
The boat is a snail.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
weird.
Hopefully...
It's a giant snail.
Hopefully Dylan's been capturing some good gameplay. And like, if you check out the video version of this podcast on YouTube, you'll see, like, we're talking about, oh, you can talk to these characters that you want to. And it's like, yeah, but this character is like a kind of slug man with an upside down face. Yeah. You know, like it's, you should definitely check out some videos on this just to kind of like, we've referenced Tim Burton, we've referenced like Coraline, some of these other things, but like they went all out with their character designs. And I think that's one of the like strong suits of the game is its visual aesthetic, especially in like Two Town. Mm-hmm. Some of the stuff that they did in Two Town was really cool. But yeah, you get on the boat, there's a big storm, you have to jump off with a umbrella.
Yeah.
And you float away and you land in a pretty sure maybe I didn't write down what this place was called. I don't think I did, but it's kind of like these like ruins of a time like long past.
Dice graveyard or something.
And this is where you meet Dicey, who is like your companion throughout the game and who like facilitates the combat system. Even ends up in a fight that she can't win, and Dicey comes to her rescue. And so then, yeah, you're introduced to the rest of the gameplay mechanics here, and the fact that, like you said a little bit earlier, Aubrey, like Dicey is used to help you solve environmental puzzles, and like he is also crucial to combat. And this is where the game starts to tutorialize you on that combat system of, as even, all you can really do is shoot the enemies with your slingshot. And all that does is break off these little like glowing orbs that then Dicey picks up. And as Dicey picks them up, you have like, once he picks up enough, then you can use your cards. And the cards have the abilities like what I read out in the beginning of giving even like a big sword or turning Dicey into an explosive or whatever. And those are the ways that you can actually damage the enemies.
Yeah.
What did you guys think of that combat system?
Grateful for the kind of auto lock on mechanic with the slingshot in those moments.
Yeah, for sure.
Because collecting that energy, especially early on when like still figuring out, it's kind of a lot to coordinate when you first start. And then once you're like, oh no, I just got to get close and I'll like snap on and like get at it and it'll be okay. The space that I took between my initial playthrough and then like when I like picked it up and like really went going, I forgot that Dicey didn't have enough pips to like roll higher. So I thought I was just dealing with a weighted dice there for a minute. I was like, I can only roll ones and twos.
Because he can only roll as high as like the chapter you're in, right?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a learning curve, and the deck building element and like, which doesn't really come into play until you're in 2-town proper and can like buy more cards and swap more cards to build your hand. But by the time I made it to 2-town and picked up the like giant axe hammer thing, I was like, oh, okay, I know my build. Like,
right.
We're good.
Unga bunga.
Exactly.
Strength build.
Whack.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a pretty like neat little mechanic because like it reminded me a little bit almost of Slay the Spires kind of gameplay, but like active instead of like turn-based like that is.
Right.
And I thought they did a good job of like giving you options. So like to collect the energy, you can stay back and like shoot them with your slingshot, or like you can run it a little bit more dangerously, but like when they attack, you can dash, like dodge through them or whatever, and that instantly like breaks their like any of the little
gives you those crystals too.
And then I enjoyed sort of the like deck building part of it, where it's just kind of like, oh, okay, like I can kind of see how these combo together. Like, let me try to build a deck that synergizes well, you know? So, and it does a pretty, like, it doesn't really hide the, like, the pots that you're breaking all throughout to, like, get the currency.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't, like, and that's the only thing you really spend the currency on, too. So, like, by the time it gives you the ability to buy cards, it's basically like, hey, you've got enough to buy, like, 10 cards. Here you go. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it, like, the board game part of it, like, I still am like, that's, like, it's cool, but it's also, like, a little bit, I don't think it's bad. It's just kind of, like, not being able to see the whole board, I guess, was kind of like, what am I trying to roll? I don't really have that much control over what I guess I couldn't figure out, like, is it always going to roll this or what here, you know?
Yeah, well, the board game part doesn't really come into play till like later, like but we can definitely touch on it now. And that was like, that didn't really work for me. Like, I liked the basic combat against enemies and like the dice rolling and stuff. When they introduced the sort of board game element to the combat scenarios, which it's like specific ones. It's not typical combat that happens in, but like, I didn't really vibe with those that much. Like, I wasn't a huge fan of the board game stuff, and I don't remember really enjoying some of the bigger boss fights either. Like, those are some of the places that I think hopefully they'll kind of tweak in the sequel.
Yeah.
I liked the core concept of just like kind of fighting mobs. I thought that was pretty fun. But yeah, I didn't really like when they tried to make it, I guess, deeper or whatever with the board game idea. That didn't really, similar to you, like I can see what they were going for and it's a cool idea, but like moment to moment, I wasn't a fan.
Yeah. Which just to clarify, because I realize we haven't. So in the combat, you get the crystals. You roll the dice, you earn up to 5 cards in your hand. And then based on what you roll the dice, you can select cards based on their cost. So like some cost like 2, some give you an additional point, some reduce the cost to purchase, some are like only 1. And so then you pull from the hand that you have available, which is 5 cards out of your 15 potential that you can have in your deck. And then that carries you through to the next until you collect more energy points in order to do it again, which you can usually get like via combat. So in the board game section, your dice roll is also moving a piece along like a board game. It's like a giant piece and you have to get it to the end of it. And the first one, especially in Two Town, is pretty blind.
Yeah. Well, and different spots on the board do different things. So like if your piece lands on this, it spawns new enemies, or it, spawns like a little bonus for you or something. And
or area of slow time.
Yeah. And it's not super clear like what those, like that's, I guess that was my kind of like complaint there, is it's not super clear what any of the spaces do. It's not like Mario Party where it's like, this is a Bowser space. It clearly is going to do a Bowser thing,
Right.
Yeah, like I think they're like vague symbols, but there's not like a key or anything early on. Like you have to land on them and go, oh, that's what this does. Great.
Yeah. And you're only probably going to like do it once a run. So like it's also kind of like, I mean, it's dice
also
game.
Kind of a little bit random. Did you
I was going to say
lost in the random?
It's a dice game, so in and of it, like it's a roll and move game, and so at its core, it is just random. So even if I knew like what the things were, at the end of the day, it's not like you can really strategize. It's not like you can.
Yeah, it's like,
you're rolling a dice.
I'm going to roll a 2, so I only move 2 and get this thing.
Yeah, I think the only thing that would have changed would have been like, I hope I roll a 2, but there's nothing that you can really do to affect that outcome.
Except for one card that you can put in your deck that if you choose to spend energy on to play it, moves the piece an additional space. Which tells me just get through it as fast as possible.
Yeah. That is
that was kind of my goal. Yeah. Just get it. It feels very much like an idea they had that they didn't fully flesh out in time for release. And so maybe they'll kind of dig into it a little bit deeper in the sequel, but personally, like
the combat makes the most effective use of the card dice.
Yeah,
and for me, like I was saying earlier, when the combat drags on too long, like I think it starts to wear out its welcome, and so the board game thing
makes
kind of exacerbated that for me. Yeah, and as opposed to like making me be like, oh, this is really fun and really cool. It was like, oh, now I'm kind of getting frustrated or tired with this mechanic, as opposed to like being charmed by it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I guess the deck I built like basically just gave me unlimited crystal things. And so I feel like I was able to get through all of the board game sections pretty quickly before they got annoying for me. Or like, I think if I had spent any longer on them, they would have gotten annoying. But I definitely feel you in like, there was one boss fight in particular that the hitboxes felt weird. That I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit here. And I think that's where I think it was like the combat was interesting, but it didn't feel geared towards like a big boss fight. It felt more geared towards fighting little dudes.
Yeah, and like for me, I played this game a few years ago, pre really any other kind of card stuff that I had gotten into. So if I continue with my like playthrough that I started up for this, I'd be interested to see like how much more efficient I am in combat. Whereas kind of if you're not really used to card based systems going into this game blind, it can be a little bit more of a grind initially trying to get through the combat scenarios because you don't really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So you find Dicey, you do some more combat to kind of, get you caught up on how the system works, and then you end up in Two Town. You walk into Two Town. Two Town is probably, as someone who got about as far as Aubrey is currently, like I personally haven't finished this game either. I got to like chapter 4. Two Town is the town, like the story of Freedom sticks out in my mind of like the characters and the, like what's happening there. But the like just the setting and the like weirdness of Two Town is what I think of when I think back to Lost in Random, because basically the town is affected by like the queen will roll her die and it will kind of affect their personalities of like which side of their personality is going to be active.
They're either like, hey, buddy, everything's wonderful, or, oh, this all sucks.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And you come to find out as you explore a little bit that there's like a separate Two Town that they're building like up in the sky. And the connecting through line is the mayor, who is like this giant character in the middle of the town, and like his hat ascends into the sky and into the other Two Town. And when you end up like going up there, there's another mayor who's Royum, which is mayor spelled backwards, who is like the evil mayor. And so just that whole kind of concept of like, okay, it's the second chapter, it's called Two Town, everybody has like dual personalities. There's like the kind of twisted evil town up in the sky. There's like just all of that stuff that's going on in this part of the game was like really interesting and really cool. And
it was all very on the nose, but also very charming. Like it
was like intentionally on the nose. Like it wasn't on the nose because they did a bad job at writing it. It was like, we want to write this to be on the like we named the evil mayor Royum. Like, and he's bad at rhyming. I was
immediately like, that's amazing. That's great.
Yeah. It reminds me of,
I wrote it down in my D&D like binder to be like, yes, okay.
We're stealing
it reminded me of the like villain in Bionicle that was like the hero's name spelled backwards. Like there was the hero that wore the golden mask, and I can't remember, like Caleb could probably give me all the names, but it was literally just like his name backwards. And it's like that level of just kind of cheesy, silly Saturday morning cartoon, like storytelling, but it works really well in this setting and this lore. And so basically the whole central idea of this chapter is that you can obviously see the door to Freedom, to like Three Town, but you can't open it because Dicey only has like pips up to 1 and 2 on him. So like he can't roll a 3 yet. And so then you meet a character named
Seymour, because he can see more.
Yeah, because he has because he has no eyes. Yeah, exactly. His name is Seymour, but the mayor took his eyes. So he needs you to get his eyes back, and then he will help you with Dicey. And so it's just like, it's a blend of like classic silly kind of cartoon storytelling mixed with like classic silly video game like MacGuffins, and like, but it all feels very intentional and like almost Deadpool levels of like fourth wall breaking. We haven't mentioned it either, but there's like a narrator throughout the whole game that's like narrating things that are happening and like sometimes arguing with even as, things are like, it's very much that vibe.
There was another game that had a similar narrator, and I'm trying to like it's almost like a mix of like Stanley Parable, or like I think some of the Fables kind of had that sort of a narrator.
Bastion had a narrator thing like that.
And like and the narrator throughout I thought was like a good way for them to like give you like little lore stuff, but also like make it a little goofy and silly, So
Yeah, so ultimately, you work your way through Two Town. Royam, like, or the mayor sends you up to talk to Royam because, like, he's kind of taking over things, and the mayor doesn't like it. And
The scarecrow.
yeah, and so Royam, like, his whole deal is that he wants to be good at rhyming, but he's really terrible at it, and so
Yeah.
he sends you on like this goose chase and ends up kind of double crossing you. Who would have seen that coming? And to get the eyes back for Seymour, you end up having to like fight him. And I'm pretty sure that's the boss fight you're talking about, Dylan.
Yeah, that was the boss fight I was talking about, where like he had this attack where he would swipe across, and I felt like even if I tried to dodge, even if I tried to dodge, like it was kind of hit or miss on whether it would hit me anyway.
Yeah, I didn't play all the way through this part. I watched like a playthrough to kind of get my notes down, but I remember when I did play him getting to the point of like, okay, this isn't fun anymore. Like it just went on too long and didn't really capture the heart of the gameplay.
There was one phase too many in that fight, I feel like. If
exactly.
they had cut it, like, because it keeps breaking up the boss fight with like
the rhyming, your
psychic attacks, basically, where you're rhyming and it deals psychic damage to him or something. So
yeah,
which is, I don't know, like that part was charming, but it's like I felt like at the last one they could have just been like, and you don't have to fight him anymore. Like that's what killed him instead of
or it could have been just like one phase of combat and then one phase of like a rhyme battle. You know, like I feel like trimming it down, like less is more. I feel like could have gone a long way. You know?
Yeah, and it's kind of like a weird like master hand sort of fight too, where it's like he's kind of like at the edge of like a stage, and and it doesn't feel as good as like fighting the little like robot dice men.
Yeah. Well, and that was the moment that made me really sit up and pay attention to the dodge mechanic, because you have this like flash that happens when you can do your like zip through things. And so I had to time my dodges to when it was like, okay, here's your cue to dodge, like the subconscious cue that is supposed to help you learn it, but you're not actually supposed to really like go by it. But it would happen, and then the arm would sweep through me 2 seconds later. Yeah, I had to restart him actually an embarrassing number of times too, because of, you know.
Well, Two Town, obviously.
Yeah,
right.
You're just sticking to
intentional. What did you think about Two Town overall? Like exploring it and kind of just like the core concept of the dual cities and dual personalities and stuff.
I did like it. I think I liked Threedom a little more. It was harder to navigate, but I felt the story situation, what was going on in Threedom, like appealed to me a little bit more.
Yeah.
But that I liked the design of the town, like moving through it and traversing it. And then in terms of like story implications, you met a lot of interesting people in Two Town, like people who were familiar with like the dice and what do they call them? Like dice knights or something like that.
Dice wielders? Is that right?
I think dice wielders, yeah. And like, but like had your back about it. We're like, yeah, just don't let the queen find out. Like, I know what you are.
Yeah.
And I know what you have, but you know, I'll be chill. Like,
because like half of a lot of the NPCs would be like, oh, that's a cool dice costume your like little friend there has. And it's like,
you're like, yeah, it's a dog in a costume. Which of the like scientists did you help?
I helped the front face and not the back face or whatever.
Yeah. The more emotionally driven one, not the scientist or logic one or whatever.
Yeah. But I also didn't expect it like that. I didn't expect it to actually let me choose. I assumed it was going to like be like, oh man, it didn't work or like it, and then it actually worked, and I was like, oh, I didn't expect it to actually like shut one of the personalities off.
Like, ooh, I just helped commit fratricide.
Yeah, I thought it was going to just be like this. They were still fighting. They were just more unaware of each other's presence or something like that. Or
yeah,
but
I think I ended up doing that just because that was like the first option that popped up. Like I went to like just talk to them, and I'd always talk to them from the front. And so I thought that was like how it was. But I also was like, well, I'm ready to move on, but I'd like to have like 5 out of 5 side quests completed before I move on. So let's just wrap this up.
yeah,
I look all over the place for those little screaming creatures. So
yeah, I like the side quest where like you had to do the series of trades where it was like you had to get the word from the lady and then take the word to the other guy and sell it to him. And then he gave you this other thing that you took to another guy. And
that's the closest I'll ever come to dealing in NFTs.
Yeah, it's something we haven't really talked about, not NFTs, which but like when you get into like a new area, it does present you with like, you know, Dylan was talking about liking exploring the world and stuff like that earlier. You're doing that a lot of times on some sort of like side quest or some sort of mission or thing that you're trying to accomplish. So you can just kind of, similar to a lot of games, just like power through and do the main quest. But there are, a handful of quirky, goofy, silly side quests. And I think memory serves me correctly. I think Two Town I enjoyed a little bit more than Threedom, as far as like I feel like as the game went on, and there's a reason I stopped playing around like chapter 4 was just I started to get like bogged down by a lot of the stuff that the game was having me do, and probably something else new came out and I just jumped to that and never came back. But like it's very charming in Two Town because it's like the first zone that you're in. And so, there's very, like, I remember the scientist character that you're talking about. I don't remember as many things from like chapter 3 and 4 that weren't part of the main quest. So,
yeah, Two Town felt more, I guess I felt more encouraged to like look into every little nook and cranny, or I was just like, yeah, like let's do it. Like the main quest stuff was so explicitly clear that I was like, okay, well, I'll get to that. Like it'll be fine.
right.
Whereas Threedom, once you got down in the trenches, it was like, where am I? Like I picked up a MacGuffin for a later quest in Threedom before I met the person that I needed to get it for. And for how, as much as it let you explore in terms of like main quest progression, it had been quite linear up to that point. I was like, well, okay, I guess I'll just keep running around.
Yeah, so like between each chapter, like kind of transitionally. So ultimately, like you defeat Royam, you get Seymour's eyes back. Odd gets his third pip, or not Odd. Dicey gets his third pip and can like roll up to 3 now. And so you're able to open the door into Threedom, and like you get these kind of transitional dream sequences, hallucinations, whatever, that give you a little bit of insight into what's happening with Odd and what's going on with like her and the Queen, ultimately leading to, what will be kind of like the final culmination of the story, which we're not going to get into on this episode, but
mostly because we don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be shocked if it's anything other than like a rescue.
Well, I know because of like my research prepping this episode, I kind of know like what ends up happening, and like the Queen is actually, kind of
she becomes
more
like sympathetic by the end of it or something.
Right, like it's one of those villains that you can kind of sympathize with, and like there is a little bit more depth there and things going on. But yeah, like ultimately you're trying to rescue Odd.
Yeah, like I imagine it tracks with like the Coraline and the, like those kind of movie type stories. So where it ends kind of like you'd expect.
So then after your dream sequence, you end up in Threedom, which is a kingdom where the monarch has died. He was murdered, and the 3 children of that monarch are infighting, blaming each other for his death, and they're fighting with like these giant
mechs, like
mechs.
Warhammer 40k, like kaiju mechs.
Yeah, they have these
The
giant
queen
mechs
gave them.
that the queen gave them and that like are controlled kind of by her roles. And so like it'll be like, oh, my turn to attack. And so they're all infighting. They're blaming each other for what happened to their father. And, that means that you kind of know what you have to do. There's this shady character, the Shadow Man, who shows up initially and like gives you, like, it's kind of the one helping you, pushing you through to be like, let's solve this thing.
Well,
And,
because when you left one town, you were chasing Nanny Fortuna, who had come and taken another child who rolled their dice and got a 6 and was being taken up to
Like
become a
Bernie or
6er like
something?
Odd was.
Right.
So you're chasing him and they stop in Threedom while you're trying to make your way through it. And he escapes off of the airship. And so you go after him and then the Shadow Man scoops him up and is like, hey, you gotta make him stop fighting because nobody cares about me anymore because of all this fighting. And now I'm not, the spooky nightmare that I once was.
Yep.
Exactly.
Just like,
Exactly.
cool, buddy.
I think that like this, I think that the execution of this idea is done really well as far as like the mechs and like the all of the characters are kind of like unlikable brats and like it's really, but I think that the creativity of what's going on here as far as like just the story stuff was less than what we had seen up to this point, where it's like, okay, I very obviously know where this is going. You kind of know exactly what's going to happen. And like, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but
yeah, I mean, we're spoiling up to the end of Threedom, but by the time I got the resolution, because I think the other killed the king, and then you meet his bodyguard who's having severe memory issues. And so you've got to collect things for her to restore her memory so that she remembers what happens. And then at the end, she was like, I remember who killed the king. It was the Shadow Man. And he's like, whoa, and like just disappears. And I had completely forgotten about him. By that point, by the time I got through with everything, I was like, oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, because you've been tracking through the muck in this world, going back and forth between each of the 3 siblings.
Literally through the trenches.
Doing their doing the investigations, doing their errands, doing whatever you have to do to like kind of get the memories back for Nishka.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, like you said,
Love
ultimately,
her. I want to be here
she
when
ends
I grow
up
old and demented.
she ends up remembering, what actually happened that night, which like, like I said, all this very much you could kind of see it coming, piece it together. And so it made the activities or like the process of gathering all the clues and stuff a little bit more chorish, because it's like, I know where we're headed. I know how this is going to end. Now I just have to like do the steps to get there. And like you said, Aubrey, navigating the Threedom was a bit more cumbersome than the previous zones had been.
Yeah. Just, well, and again, once I had to like use the map, and then if you miss something, you're hosed, which, I'm zipping through dialogue and running around and using the sprint button. I totally missed that the Baron or whatever just gives you the key to the memory vault or whatever to get the thing. And so I'm like, great, now I got to track this key down. And I covered every inch of the trenches like 3 times before I finally gave up and Googled it. And I was like, oh yeah, it's right there next to him.
Oof.
You just have to pick it up right next to him in there. And I'm like, mother. Like I had that whole confrontation, I think, with the queen when you come across the like the old mech and get the like memory sword or whatever. It was, I ran into all of those triplets that were actually just one kid. I learned the ways of, peaceful warriors and the ways of violent warriors. Like I did every bit of Threedom that I could do before I finally Googled like, where the heck is this key? And then, oh yeah, it's right next to him.
Right.
But I had just zipped off, which the Shadow Man was then popping back up and be like, hey, you're taking too long. And I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. This is a years-long conflict that I have just landed in. What do you want from me?
I am a child, sir. Why is it my responsibility?
I'm gonna digest your buddy if you don't make me scary again. Well,
why don't you just tell people that? That's pretty scary.
10-year-olds.
Yeah, right. What did you think of Threedom, Dylan?
I don't think I had as big of an issue with it as Aubrey did. I definitely liked Toodum better, or Two Town better.
Yeah.
But I didn't hate Threedom.
Right.
It's pretty much just what you guys said, where I think that one is a little bit more like, I see where this is going, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's a little less interesting.
Yeah, which, like, some of it I give it a little bit of grace for, because it's like, I think it's a T-rated game, or maybe even E10.
If that, yeah.
And so, like, I try to keep in mind, like, okay, this is maybe geared towards a younger audience than me, too, where it's not trying to be super, super complicated, but I still thought it was, like, good, you know?
Yeah. The mechs probably, like the kaiju and mech kind of thing,
that,
probably bumped it up a point for you.
I did think that was pretty cool. I did. I was like, do I get a mech? Can I?
Can I have one? And the demented old warrior lady bumped it up a notch for me.
Well, there you go. Perfect.
Something for everyone.
Nice. So, Threedom, that was as far as we were required to play for the effing game swap. So I kind of have just like a few final like kind of questions to throw at you guys before we roll into our final top, or like our closing game for this episode. Aubrey, you've already kind of touched on it, but like, do you guys plan on continuing to play Lost in Random? Do you want to move on into the game and see, you want to see how the story ends? Do you want to see what the last few chapters hold? Like, where are you at with that?
I would like to. Yeah, I would like to get back in and play it and beat it. I also feel that way about Yakuza, but Yakuza is a much bigger commitment.
Yeah, you can't beat Yakuza. It goes on forever.
It really feels that way. So yes, I would like to beat it. I'd like to get back in and beat it. And I feel like I'm going to have to, like, in a very, like, non-dramatic way, make my, like, sit down with myself and be like, we're getting through this little sneaky section in 4. That's, the style of combat, like the style of gameplay I just don't really care for that much. We're going to get through that, and then we'll get back in the flow, and it'll be, it'll be good again. It'll be
right. You just got to like sit down for a Saturday afternoon and just actually like play it for a good chunk and get back into it.
Exactly. Just put myself back in the flow, which is weirdly requires deliberate effort, which is very silly, but
No, I know what you mean.
It's
What about you, Dylan?
I mean, it's definitely one that I would like to play more of. I think the struggle is it's obviously like competing now with like other games that I want to play, especially games that I want to try to get through by the end of the year.
Right.
So that I can like talk about them in end of year discussion stuff. But I mean, also I think that, as a bonus, I just looked it up on how long to beat. And like, if I was just focused on the main story, it's 12 and a half hours. If you do the main story and the side stuff, it's 16 hours, so like at that point
you don't lose the key.
Yeah. Like at that point, it's kind of like, oh, okay. I mean, like that's not too like,
it's like 2 afternoons.
Well, and just like it feel like it I think it does a pretty good job of being manageable. Like you can pretty much go through any of the chapters in a couple hours, right? Like chapter 1 goes pretty like a lot. I would say chapter really 1 goes pretty quick. But I don't remember how much of like the dice graveyard is part of chapter 1 versus 2. And so like maybe it's a little bit longer than I'm giving it credit for, but like each of the towns or zones, I feel like you could probably get, like if 12 hours is accurate, you could probably get through them in a couple hours each, which is not unreasonable. That's like a sit down an evening and you get through a zone, and it's a 6-zone game, And so like in a week, if you just play a couple of hours a night, you can get through it pretty easily, So it's one I'd like to get to and finish, just because I enjoy the world of it and just the the weird characters. As it goes, like you said, as it gets longer, maybe some of the shine wears off and it becomes a little bit more annoying. And so I think, if anything, that might make me fall off of it in favor of some of these other games. But I did enjoy like what I played of it, you know?
Yeah, that's like literally where I'm at, where it's like I played up to about chapter 4 and then fell off, and it's always been one where I'm like, I need to go back and finish that. But yeah, kind of as it goes on, it was just like, once you've done which is why I said, like, you know, get to chapter 3, and I think you'll have like a good idea of what this is. Because like once you've done that, other than maybe, you know, like Aubrey, you know, having to do like a sneaky section or whatever, them throwing a few little slightly different gameplays, like you've seen what the game has to offer. And so if you're really vibing with that and you really love it, great. But if not, like it does start to kind of lose its charm a little bit as it goes on. But I think that charm is strong enough that like even if it loses some of it, like it's still really solid.
Yeah.
With that being said, though, like I mentioned at the beginning, they're working on a sequel. What would you guys like to see in a sequel? Like, you know, obviously not knowing exactly how this game wraps up or whatever happens, but just like mechanically or like based on your experience, what would you want to see from the sequel? Like for me, I would want to see the combat refined a little bit. I don't want to see the board game stuff refined a little bit.
Yeah. You know, the very like quality of life things that like tighten up and tune up and stuff. It's a little tricky to say because we're only about halfway through the game. So I don't know like how involved the cards get by the end of the game. But something that has like a broader environmental impact would be really fun. But maybe there's something in the late game where you can like kind of lay down an AoE or lay down a series of traps for the enemies or something. Could be really fun. And I don't know, somehow some way to make the board game sections where you are moving the piece better.
Make it fun.
Yeah. Which I don't have the vision of how to do that, but yeah, I don't want to see that gameplay element go away, but I would like to see something a little different from it.
Yeah, like some refinement.
Yeah.
Just kind of tweak it.
Yeah, no, I do. It's one of those where it's like I'm trying to decide if the things that I would like to see are maybe just not in the spirit of the game too. Because like as somebody who likes board games and likes more complicated board games, it's one where it's like I'd like there to be a little bit more depth and strategy to like the deck building and board game sections. But it's also like I kind of like the simplicity of it too, and I feel like the simplicity and the randomness is like a lot of. I like the board games where you can sort of mitigate some of the randomness and be a little bit more strategic, but the game is literally lost in random. You know, like the whole point is the randomness, and so you know, I think there's like the mitigation and just being able to like craft your deck. I would like to see some more variety in maybe the cards, you know, just because at least at the point where I'm at in the game, it's like, do you want a sword, a bow, a big hammer thing?
Always big hammer thing.
And like I found a deck that synergized pretty well basically in chapter 2. Like I put something together where it was just kind of like, here's your sword, it gets more powerful the more sword cards you play. Here's like a bonus that like hurts them when you break their crystals, and then also like increases the amount of energy you get per crystal. So I was basically just always having a full hand of cards and then was just like pumping up my power. But like that just kind of meant that I didn't change it after that because it worked so well, you know? And so I'd like to see
like reasons to experiment.
Well, and I mean, some of this is me coming off of the Monster Hunter beta, where it's like 14 different weapons that all have drastically different play styles. I'm kind of like, I'd like it to, you know, give me a little bit more variety. You know, a lot of it feels kind of the same. But again, I hesitate to say it needs to do that, or, you know, I think it should do that, because I feel like that's kind of not what the game is trying to be. So Would I enjoy the game more if it did a little bit more with the combat system? Yes. But also I'd be okay if they cut the combat way down and did more story and exploration stuff. So
yeah, it's that like, because I'm over here like, nah, you got Big Hammer. What do you need other than Big Hammer? Like, they can't swing back on you if they're a pile of rubble. But then also, like, the more variety there is, the more approaches there are, the better your chances are of finding in my case, in Hades, your Twin Fists of Melphon, which was a fairly late game weapon. But, like, that clicked for me. And so if they were just like, yeah, we got sword, we got bow, I'd be like, oh, but what about the boxing gloves? Like, which was kind of like just fast Big Hammer. It's like,
yeah,
they can't hit back if I'm hitting you 15 times in a second. Like,
yeah, so like a little bit more variety, basically, like a little bit more options for
something to shake
variety
up your
and play style.
Yeah, so you could make it really weird.
So we're not giving full verdicts, but like if you were going to give this a letter rating on the FN Gamers review scale based on what you played so far, where do you think you guys would put it?
Probably like a B.
I'm gonna say a B+. The hitbox and dodge thing with Royam is still very much in my mind, and the thoroughly unhelpful aesthetic map is very much fresh in my mind. But strong concept, great elements, ultimately like very well executed. It's it's not a Rockstar game, but in terms of levels of polish, but also I haven't really played a Rockstar game since LA Noire, so it's
no
not what
other
I want.
game is a Rockstar game as far as levels of polish.
Yeah. And just the sentence since LA Noire, like that is not the Rockstar game I'd pull out. So.
That's literally the only one I've played.
I saw some article recently, like going over some like.
Hope you're ready for the next game swap. You're playing LA Noire.
Oh, I would love to play it. I have it, and I want to get back to it. It's so good. I fell off of it, and I'm like, I need to play it, but now I have to restart it.
But I saw some article or some like video that was like a bunch of secrets or a bunch of like kind of just really small touches to Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, where it was just like even back then they were just putting all of this like care into immersion and like very simple little mechanics and stuff that like most develop, which is why we haven't gotten a new Rockstar game since 2018. And and we haven't gotten a new Grand Theft Auto in like an entire generation of consoles. But yeah, so we're going to now roll into our closing game for this episode. So I prepped a game and I had like dice in the brain, obviously, of like trying to incorporate a little bit of dice into this. And my idea...
So we're just rolling dice and whoever gets the highest number after 3 rolls wins.
No, we're playing Farkle and we have to narrate our rolls. No.
It's like, hold on, let me go pull out all my D6s.
The idea I have with the dice element of it is that the dice is going to kind of determine like what you have to.
Okay.
But that will fall apart as we go because as a number is rolled, it can't be rolled again. So like, we'll just kind of see how it goes. I wanted to incorporate dice just as like a kind of silly gimmick because that's, what we're talking about. I don't know that this is the most efficient, best way to do it, but it's what I came up with. So the idea for the game that I went with is I called it top 3 on Metacritic. So I will roll a D6 and the number it lands on will determine the game series that you have to name the games in that series that have the highest critic scores in order.
Okay. In
So
order.
1, 2, and 3.
Oh.
That's the crinkle.
Well, you don't have to name them. You don't have to guess the first one first, second one second, third one third. But they have to, if you get the top 3, like if you put them in the correct order, then you will get 5 points for
Sounds like
that
you're just
set.
making this up right now as we go.
No, this is too complicated to be.
No, I have it written down. I wrote this down like a week or 2 ago when I prepped this doc, and now I'm like trying to remember how I came up with it at the time.
Definitely several ideas sewed together. So you're rolling the d6?
So I will roll the die, and that will determine the series. If you get all 3 correct, then you will get 5 points.
Okay.
Otherwise, you get a point for each one you got correct.
All right.
Okay. Lots of 1s and 2s coming our way.
Are
And,
we just guessing, like shouting it out, or is it like back and
Or
forth, or
will it be assigned?
It's back and forth. The one thing that I didn't kind of decided I want to throw it to you guys is like, so say Aubrey rolls, she gets the series, she guesses and gets like 1 correct, and there's 2 empty slots. Do I then throw it to Dylan
do we
for
do
a
Family
chance?
Feud rules or no?
To steal some points? I'd be down with that.
Okay,
I've accepted I'm losing this one.
when you throw it to the second person, do they get
Until
the
he rolls and it's like top 3 critical Barbie games, and I'm just like,
if it gets thrown to the second person to like steal, do they get like one guess to try to get a point, and we just leave it at that? Okay,
I would say so.
cool.
Do it
All
like
right.
Family Feud, where they can steal, but they just got to get the one right.
Yeah.
All right, so we will say ladies first. Aubrey, I will let you roll, or I will roll a d6 for you. It's a 5, which means you have to give me the top 3 Mario Kart games on Metacritic critic scores. You don't have to like tell me their scores, but just like,
Well, that's good. I feel like Mario Kart 8 is deluxe, the Switch version.
yes.
Mm-hmm. Is there a distinction?
And then
on
just
that? Can you say or
Mario
no?
Kart 8 is the Wii U version.
That is correct. I cannot say.
Okay, so I'm going to say that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is in the top 3.
Yes, it is.
Okay. And I feel like Mario Kart Wii is in the top 3.
It is not.
Do I
Double
just get like
dash.
the one failure?
So that will give you 1 point. Yes.
Okay.
Throwing it to Dylan
Double
for an
dash.
opportunity to guess. Double Dash is not in
What?
the top 3.
How dare they?
I did think about Double Dash. Double Dash was going to be, it was, because my other one was going to be 8 Deluxe, then 8 on the Wii U, because it had like the most. But I was like, let me throw the Wii in there, because the Wii one is really remembered
Yeah.
fondly with the motion controls.
What was it? Just 8, and 7?
So it was, I need to check because I wrote the scores down because I thought that would be interesting.
Hmm.
But the way I have them listed doesn't make sense. So I'm just doing a double check real
Okay.
quick.
Can't believe Double Dash is in the top 3. Come on.
What are we doing, critics?
The one time they kind of change up the formula for a Mario Kart game and you don't put it in the top 3? Despicable. What is games media?
Something Gamergate.
Okay. So I have them out of order, but
Okay.
but my scores are correct. I just listed
Okay.
them wrong. So number 1 is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe with a 92.
Mhm.
Number 2 was Mario Kart DS with a 91.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah. And
Is-
number 3 was Mario Kart 8 with an 88.
Just because it was on a console nobody really cared for doesn't mean it wasn't a good game.
Well, that's why they ported so many games to Switch from Wii U, because it was like, these games are good.
Yeah.
Just
you just
nobody played them.
Appreciate them. Except for Twilight Princess and Wind Waker.
Yeah.
Well,
They got
Wind
their
Waker was-
HD release.
yeah. But yeah. Nobody played those either. That's why they want them to come to Switch.
Exactly. Like, I don't want to buy a Switch.
All right, cool. So that leaves us with Aubrey getting 1 point. Moving on, we'll roll a d6 for Dylan.
We're telling ourselves by calling it a D6, but let's move on.
You rolling in D&D Beyond?
No, I'm rolling in Google.
No, he would never roll anything besides a 1 in D&D if he was rolling in D&D Beyond.
D&D Beyond.
Yeah.
I think most people would just call it a dice, and then we call it a D6 because I think we do the RPGs. So
yeah, well, it's because all the D&D and the GURPS and everything, and because on Google Dice, like there's a list of different size dice here that I have to click on. We got a 2 for Dylan.
Cool, maybe,
which is Assassin's Creed.
Ooh.
All right. I gotta think of what all the Assassin's Creed with Ezio were.
Accurate. That is accurate.
I feel like it's going to be 2 of the Ezio ones and then like 1 other one, and it's either going to be like Black Flag or it's going to be like one of the I think it's either going to be Black Flag or Odyssey. So I'm going to guess, what were the Ezio ones? Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, and what was
Old
the
Man
old
Ezio?
one?
I don't know.
Man Ezio one. Revelations, was that it?
Yeah, you're asking what the Ezio games were called.
Yeah, just what the titles were.
Those 3. Yeah, okay. Correct.
I'm going to go Brotherhood on the list.
Brotherhood is there. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to go Revelations.
Revelations is not on the list.
Ooh.
Aubrey, you have a chance to steal a point.
I have a chance to steal a point. There's been quite a few Assassin's Creed.
Yes, there has. Dylan didn't kill enough time for you to think of an answer.
I gave you several great guesses. So.
I know. Well, I'm torn between taking one from the Ezio trilogy.
There's only one more.
Or I'm gonna... It's like, I don't know if Odyssey was well scored because a lot of people were just talking about it, or if my weirdly lesbianic social media was just really crushing on like big buff assassin
Cassandra.
lady. Yeah, it's like I don't know if that means it was well rated or if there was just a lot of like female gay panic happening.
I mean, everybody liked Cassandra, no matter which way you swing, which team you bat for.
Karlach was there.
Cassandra was the better protagonist 100%, but I do like it was very obvious they used the same like body frame for both characters because she was like the same size as Alexios, which there are large women. There's nothing wrong with that. It could just be who she is, but it's like they didn't go to the trouble of making like a separate
model
structure. Yeah. But anyways, pick a game.
Anyway, I know. You know what? I'll do it for the lesbians. Odyssey.
No.
It
was very much your timeline.
Okay.
What was it? Black Flag and Origins?
No, so it was number 1 Assassin's Creed 2 with a 90.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then number 2 was Assassin's Creed Brotherhood with an 89. And then number 3, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag with an 88.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you and the critics line up.
Me?
You really like Black
Andrew.
Flag. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much all Assassin's Creed. Like, I don't think there's an Assassin's Creed fan that would disagree with this particular. Like, people love those are the 2 best Ezio games. I'm surprised Dylan guessed Revelations ahead of 2.
I don't. I didn't know. I didn't play any of the Ezio ones besides a little bit of 2.
Gotcha.
So I was just trying to. I couldn't remember your video where you ranked them all, where you put those ones. So I was just like, Old Man Ezio seems like a cool idea. Maybe that was like highly ranked.
They were wrapping up the trilogy. Maybe it was a high point.
But Black Flag was like peak.
Yeah, I should have guessed Black Flag.
Like
first.
people who didn't give a crap about Assassin's Creed loved Black Flag because it was just a fun pirate game. So
yeah.
I was gonna say, I thought you just really liked the pirate aesthetic.
So that's most people did. Yeah, exactly. So cool. That ties up the score 1-1. We'll roll a die here for Aubrey. and it can't be a 5 or a 2, which is great because we rolled a 1.
Wow.
Mass Effect.
There's only 4 games in this. But she's going to blow it because she's going to guess Andromeda first.
I want to so bad.
Is the Legendary Collection technically a separate game? Are there 5 that she has to guess from, or is it just the 4?
It's just the 4.
Okay. Go ahead, guess Andromeda.
I'm going to guess 2. Is 2 in the top 3?
Yes.
Okay. 1.
Yes.
And then Andromeda.
No.
I'm going to
say looking.
I am
steal
giving
1
up.
point and guess 3.
I'm giving up 5
Correct.
points.
Yeah, looking at the fact that I put Mass Effect on here, maybe I was initially wanting you to
To rank them.
to rank them. Yeah, 1 through 3.
Yeah, can I get the top 3 Dark Souls games according to Metacritic, please?
Hey, no future spoilers. So the way these broke down is Mass Effect 2 at number 1 with a 96.
Yep. 3?
Okay.
Mass Effect
next?
3 at number 2 with a 93.
Oh.
And then Mass Effect at number 3 with a 91. All 3 games above 90.
Which in terms of quality, objective, quantifiable quality, I would agree with. I think I would have an easier time getting through 3 than I would 1, just with how different 1 is from 2. But, Andromeda.
Yeah, I think
It's
I
like
probably
my special little toothless rat dog that I love so much.
So, what a metaphor. Yeah, I think my original intention must have been to have you place them in their position because Mass
Had
Effect
to be.
only has 3 games. I should have written down more notes when I wrote this game up. But that's
Yeah,
okay.
it's
I love
like,
it. I
Dylan,
love that I got
Dylan,
it.
which of the 14 Assassin's Creeds that have come out are the best? Aubrey, out of these 4 games, pick the 3 that are the best.
And 1 is universally panned and they thought killed the franchise.
To be fair, I think that's the only one that we'll get there. So that eliminates 1, 2, and 5. We'll now roll a dice for Dylan. A die for Dylan.
So perfect that I got it though, because Dylan would have just taken the 5 points.
Yeah, I would
Speaking
have been
of perfect,
2, 3, 1, done.
Dylan, give me the top 3 Tomb Raider games.
What?
All right.
There's a
This
bunch.
is Metacritic,
but-
right?
Correct.
All right, so there's probably not going to be stuff before 2000. There could be, but probably not. And also, pretty much everything before the 3 new Tomb Raider games was terrible. So I'm going to go with Tomb Raider, like the reboot.
The 2013 Tomb Raider.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that is there, giving you a point.
I'm pretty confident that's on the list. I'm pretty confident what the third one is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, correct?
The third one is Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Rise of, and so
The second one was Shadow of the Tomb
Yeah,
Raider.
the second one is Shadow of the Tomb Raider.
okay.
In the reboot trilogy.
I feel like I heard more positive things about Rise. So I'm going to put Rise there next. Rise of the Tomb Raider or whatever, the third one.
Yeah, the industry seemed to really like Shadow more and kind of dunked on Rise, but it is there. Rise
And
of the
then
Tomb Raider is on
Shadow,
the list.
I'm going to guess as my third game.
That is incorrect. Shadow of the Tomb Raider is not there. Aubrey, would you like to
They
steal?
liked it more, but it was somehow not on the Metacritic. What are you talking about?
I'm just talking about the conversations around the game at the time. Like people, when Rise came out, they were like, this is like
This is
the
incredible.
worst version of this game. Like,
This is rigged. I'm sorry. He's like, yeah, so they like this one better, but apparently it's not higher on the Metacritic.
The buzz was better.
when I say
It's like
I mean, I listened to 3 gaming podcasts at the time. So It's
I was
not all
gonna
of
say.
Metacritic.
Yeah.
By my impression, there was much more buzz surrounding Odyssey than
Well-
Valhalla.
Well, yeah.
So are you going to guess which game not in the new Tomb Raider trilogy is apparently
Right?
more well liked? Oh, I know what it is. Dumb. I'm annoyed now.
If you say Uncharted, no.
I don't know that I know another Tomb Raider game. Can I look up a list of Tomb Raider games if there's no scores associated?
It's one of, is it one of the like top down ones or whatever? Like the ones that were coming out around the same time as the reboot trilogy, but were like,
I can't answer that, Dylan.
Like, I feel like there's something in the back of my brain a little bit about like
I mean, like,
this
describe
infamous
it
movie?
or give me
it's like a golden something. Tomb Raider, the golden.
Tomb Raider Golden.
I'll look
something.
it up. I'll look it up because if I see the scores, it doesn't matter. And I'll just read you the list.
Okay.
All right. So we've got.
I mean, I've got one from my Game Boy Advance, but I really don't feel like that.
Yeah,
one
I don't
scored well on
feel like that's
Metacritic.
gonna be the... You're welcome to guess that one. I don't think
gonna
that's
say.
gonna be.
Come on, Andromeda, just give this to Dylan.
I already gave it to Dylan with Andromeda.
Where's the list? Okay. So we've got Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider 2, Tomb Raider 3, Tomb Raider Last Revelation. That was kind of like the original run. And then there's Tomb Raider, Tomb Raider Chronicles, Tomb Raider Curse of the Sword, Tomb Raider The Prophecy, and Tomb Raider Angel of Darkness. That was kind of like the PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 era, I think. Tomb Raider Legend, Tomb Raider Anniversary, and Tomb Raider Underworld was like the 360.
The Angelina Jolie era.
Yeah. Lara Croft and the Guardian of Light was
I think that's
like
what I'm thinking of.
and then there's Tomb Raider, Temple of Osiris, Relic Run, Lara Croft
Those
Go.
are the overhead ones.
Yeah.
That sounds mobile.
Go was
Go.
that it was developed. It was like a puzzle game by Square Enix. It was like Hitman
Oh.
Go and Lara
Oh,
Croft
yeah,
Go,
yeah.
those
I
ones.
do remember that.
And then they've got like the remaster collection. So Guardian of Light, I think, is probably the one you were thinking.
That's
of.
the one I'm thinking of, yeah. And I'll go
Okay.
with that one because it's literally the only one I.
Well, in the largest case of overthinking it that I've ever seen, that is not on the list. So number one is Tomb Raider, 1996, with a
No.
94 on Metacritic.
That's generous.
People loved Tomb Raider back in the day.
All 5 people who were reviewing games back then.
Them big old polygons. And then number two was Rise of the Tomb Raider with an 88.
Wait, that was number
And-
one?
Yeah. Tomb Raider was number one with a 94. And then number three was the 2013 reboot with an 86.
I do agree that Rise was better than Shadow.
Shadow is my favorite that I played, and that could have been Time and Place. Who knows what that was? But like out of the three, I enjoyed that one the most. Quality, I feel like you could probably just pick any of them out of the line, and they're all
They're
pretty
pretty
good. I'm
close,
excited to see
yeah.
whatever comes next.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just liked the story. There was a lot more Jonah in Rise than there was in Shadow.
Really?
And then, yeah. And then I preferred the jungle setting to the Arctic setting.
Oh, I think I have them backwards.
Yeah.
This whole time I've had them backwards. So everything I said about the critics earlier, Dylan, that was wrong. It was backwards.
That's okay. That's about what I expect from your Here, Aubrey, here's Mass Effect. Dylan, I'm going to intentionally, or I'm going to give you a hint, sort of, but it's wrong.
Well, that's what you get for not liking Death Stranding. Next, we have two more numbers to roll. It can either be 4 or 6. So we'll see who gets. It's Aubrey's roll now.
Which of the Baldur's Gate games are on the 1, 2, and 3?
There were little like side games.
They were all just expansions. I don't know if it would differentiate.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, so we got to 6 first. That means you get to guess the top 3 Witcher games. No, I'm just kidding.
I was about to make a joke. What's the like an Elder Scrolls?
Yeah. No. Resident Evil.
Okay.
Do they differentiate between
Are the
remakes?
remakes different from?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Currently, the score is Dylan 4, Aubrey 3.
I'm gonna say Resident Evil 7 or Biohazard is in the top 3.
It is not. Dylan, would you like to steal?
Damn. Whoa. Whoa.
I would like to steal,
Whoa.
but now I have to rethink my guess. I feel like the safest guess to throw out here is 2 remake. But
feel
I
like-
could be totally wrong because they could just have given.
I was gonna say 2 original.
Yeah,
before
they
I
could
said
have just
2
given
remake.
2 and 4 super high scores. But I feel like the third one would still be 2 remake.
So you're going with 2 remake?
Yeah.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
That is also not on the list.
What is this list? Code
Can I
Veronica.
So-
guess another one?
Is this actually the Mila Jovovich movies and we just had it wrong? Like,
Oh, yeah, my bad. I swapped over to movies.
It's the IMDb score, not the Metacritic.
So
Rotten
the
Tomatoes.
number 1 was Resident Evil 4 at 96. The original.
Really?
Resident Evil 4, everybody's favorite game.
yeah.
Number 2 was Resident Evil Code Veronica at 94,
That's
which
gotta be
that one surprised me.
a
Huh.
joke. That's
It's either a joke or it's just a product of, like Aubrey said earlier, like less reviewers equaling. Like, if you look at the top 10 video games on Metacritic of all time, like, Soul Calibur or whatever being on there, it's like, yeah, different. It was a different time.
It was a different time. You didn't have blogspot.nerd.io or whatever.
Number 3 is the Resident Evil 4 remake with 93.
It got higher than 2. Okay.
Which
I thought 2 was the
what's the plot of
highest
4? What's 4
rated.
about?
He goes to a little Spanish town.
Oh.
Yeah.
The one that just got its remake recently.
Yeah,
Yeah, the most
Leon.
recent remake.
Leon is the main character. And he's rescuing the president's daughter, Ashley.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ashley. Everybody hates
I'm-
Ashley, but
I
best game
know.
ever.
I'm so surprised that the one where you escort around a
Idiot.
beats the one where they introduced Nemesis.
Well, the original one was kind of like early 3D cameras and stuff, and like Resident Evil 4 back in the day was a really big deal. And so it makes sense that the OG was on the list. I don't know that I would
Yeah.
have expected it to be number 1, but yeah, the remake kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
That leaves the final game series going to Dylan with
So he's got to
Grand-
whiff it, and
Grand Theft
Sorry.
Auto.
Grand Theft Auto.
he's got to whiff it, and I got to get one to tie it
Right.
up.
Because currently it is Dylan 4, Aubrey 3. So it's kind of still technically like anybody's game,
Yeah.
but
Right.
GTA 5's on the list.
yes. Also, there's a tie on this one, so there's 4 potential options.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they count the like expansion stuff, like Ballad of Gay Tony
no.
and stuff that technically came out as like standalones? Okay.
No, because you had to have GTA 4 to play those.
Okay.
You couldn't just buy Gay Tony and put it in your Xbox.
Okay.
You had to take him to dinner first.
He was
Yeah.
close. He was close.
No,
Spy
he was
Gay
he was
Tony.
not. He was a Grand Theft Auto character. What are you talking about? It's a great expansion, though.
I'm pretty sure that the remaining 2 are going to be San Andreas and GTA 4. I'm just trying to figure out which one I feel more confident about being on this list so I can guess it first just in case I'm wrong.
Not Biohazard.
I think I'm going to guess San Andreas first.
San Andreas is on the list.
And then I'm going to
Mm.
guess GTA 4.
GTA 4 is also on the list. If you guess the last one, you'll get the full 5-point bonus because there was a tie.
There's a tie, that's right. So it's either going to be Vice City or GTA 3. I'm going to guess Vice City.
So close to
You
greatness.
There's
Learned
3.
nothing. Probably the
Aubrey-
first one.
Aubrey, you want to?
Is it
you
Grand
want that
Theft Auto?
point?
Yeah.
It's
like
not
just Grand Theft
GTA
Auto.
1 or 2.
No.
It can't be.
No, it was the other one Dylan mentioned. It was 3.
Ah.
3, yeah.
It's like I've lost anyway, but
So the list breaks down, which kind of surprised me, but number 1 was GTA 4 with a 98.
Wow.
Wow.
Because GTA 5 was getting 10s though, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
But so was GTA 4 apparently.
Yeah.
GTA 4 was like GTA 4 and Red Dead 2, or not Red Dead 2, Red Dead 1 were like the beginning of like modern Rockstar of like trying to tell compelling stories and stuff, and like, you know.
Yeah, GTA 4 is what pulled them up from just the like, oh yeah, they're that, you know, that awful game where you play as a gangbanger running around shooting people, kind of like that. I mean, it was also, we were just old enough to finally like play Grand Theft Auto games, but like 4 seemed to really put it in like, no, this is a story experience.
Yeah.
So then the tie for second place was GTA 3 and GTA 5, both at 97.
Gotcha.
Tight race.
So like 1 point below 4. And then coming in third was San Andreas at 95.
Whew.
So
I'm curious now what like Red Dead's Metacritic scores are and LA Noire.
Red Dead Redemption is probably like way up there like these. Red Dead 2 is a little more divisive. A lot of people didn't like the slow pacing of it. LA Noire is probably closer to like, I would guess high 80s because it wasn't quite as like prestigious.
Experimental, yeah.
But like people really dug the like crazy facial tech at the time that you know is kind of been memeified at this point, but like at the time was really impressive. So I might have got it some higher scores. But yeah, Rockstar just
league of our own.
They seem to kind of struggle with like third person shooting and like character movement, but they push the industry forward in a lot of other ways with their games. So cool. Well, that ends the game with Dylan at 7, Aubrey at 3. Next time we do this, I'll remember my rules of like actually like ranking them for points, maybe refining this a little bit. Like we hope the Lost in Random sequel will be refined a little bit.
If you hadn't put me in the Mass Effect, my love for Andromeda lost me.
That's true.
But like you knew not to guess it, and you did it anyway.
I did.
Yeah, you could have got some serious points there.
Yeah, it's not like you had like these like rose-colored glasses, and it was like, oh, I just thought it was really higher rated than it was. You knew it wasn't going to be number 3.
But that's the thing. That's the important thing to know about me. I will always, always, always choose the bit first.
That's true. That is true.
Which is why we hired you and why you make double what Dylan makes.
Exactly.
Yep. Moving into housekeeping, as far as the podcast goes, Game Swap Month will continue on our next episode with Yakuza Like a Dragon. Dylan will be hosting that episode. Following that, we have year-end content coming up. We will have our predictions results episode for the year and our new predictions for next year. We will have our Game of the Year awards episode. We will have episode 150 where we want to hear from you all. We will be posting a new channel in our Discord where you can ask us questions that we will then answer on our episode 150, whether they be about the show, about our process, about content, whether they just be about, you know, our favorite character in Soul Calibur growing up, or whether it be about, you know, our pets. You can ask anything you want to in this and we'll answer it if it's not ridiculous. So
I know a lot about animation for someone who's not in the arts at all.
We'll open that channel up. It should be open at the time you're hearing this. Should have opened last week with the previous episode. So post your questions there. We're gonna read those off and ask those or answer those during our 150th episode. We'll also do a little bit of a look back on this year as far as our content and like the last 50 episodes, like we've kind of been doing over the last couple of years. I think that's worked pretty well. So yeah. A lot of fun, exciting things this time of year on the podcast. It's kind of like my favorite time of year as far as content goes. I'm really excited about some of the stuff that we've got coming down the pipe. Really been enjoying the Game Swap episodes we've been doing. I think it's been a fun experiment. If you've been enjoying them, let us know in the Discord. It might be something that we revisit in the future. Dylan, what's going on YouTube?
Well, we've had some videos come out recently.
They're still doing that, which is good.
Yeah, we're still
good
doing
sign.
The video thing. We're recording this episode early, so whatever. I think the most recent one that came out was the Monster Hunter video, where I kind of talk about, as a big Monster Hunter fan, the things that I'm most excited for after getting a chance to play in the beta. And so, what if you're interested in Monster Hunter or just want to hear me talk about one of my favorite games, check that out. We've also got some upcoming videos. Some are still to be determined, but we're also going to be, similar to the podcast, rolling into some of our like year-end video stuff. So like we'll probably
top 10s and
like
whatnot.
Our top 10 lists of video games that we played this year. So be on the lookout for those. And then we're still, if you are an only YouTube podcast listener, like if you get your podcast on YouTube, we are still rolling out like some of our older episodes through, on our off weeks of videos. So you get some bonus content over there. You can't access those on the regular podcast feed anyway, but because YouTube, if we want to actually upload it with something that makes it worth being on YouTube, like a video, that we can't just RSS feed it. So,
right.
But yeah,
cool. And then,
and go like, subscribe, leave a comment on videos. If you are on YouTube listening to this podcast, leave a comment or a like. It helps us out. Thank you.
Yes. you like jumping into the comments and literally just like posting an emoji or something helps that video gain traction more than it would expect. So if you can do that, it would be great.
It's the difference between several hundred views usually and like 8.
Yeah. So as far as like keeping up with the show, if you want to see some of our short form content or keep up with like episodes and things like that, we are on social media. We're on TikTok, we're on X, we're on Instagram. If you want to actually hang out with us, if you want to talk to us, if you want to be part of the upcoming like AMA or Game of the Year discussions, or usually around the Game Awards and other kind of like Jeff Keighley's Game Awards and other kind of like bigger events or showcases in the gaming industry, our Discord, we have a channel where we like discuss those things live while they're happening. Jump into our Discord server. There's a link in the podcast description. You can join, you can chat with us, you can chat with other members of the community. We could talk about the games we like. You can tell us what you thought of Lost in Random. And with all that being said, Aubrey, you have any weird trivia or PSAs you want to shout out before we wrap this thing up?
Well, while we're moving into the holiday season and you're considering more charitable giving or like donating to a local food pantry, try and look up either your local food pantry, and if they have specific requests out for things, often they'll ask for things that they specifically need, and or just donating cash or like money is better than just bringing them 50 cans of peas, because they can often buy things in bulk and they know what they have a lot of and can probably use your dollar a little more effectively than you can in terms of procuring things that people will actually need.
Cool. Yeah, that was a very good PSA. Thanks for shouting that out. I hope that you all listened to the episode to the end and didn't just like shut it off as soon as we started going into housekeeping.
Started doing housekeeping.
Which is what I would probably have done. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to our Lost in Random episode. Thank you for listening to the Effing Gamers video game swap that we've been doing this month. Hopefully you've been enjoying it. That's all we have for this episode. Thanks so much for listening, and remember that random rules.